Welcome to the Leaders in Payments podcast, where we talk to C-level leaders from across the payments landscape. We'll be discussing the products and services that impact the payment space today, as well as trends and predictions for the future of payments. We will also hear stories from our guests about their journeys to the top.
Because we don't need to educate anybody about the product category. Typically, they're already using fleet cards from the incumbents already, and we're there when they're looking for something that's new and better. But our median customer is, I would say, more like a $4 million revenue business with, say, 12 to 15 vehicles in their fleet.
That was Daniel Simon, the CEO and founder of Coast, and he is my special guest today on this episode 182 of the Leaders in Payments podcast. And I'm your host, Greg Myers. Daniel is a Boston University graduate with a law degree from Yale and a passion for building really great software products in complex spaces that make them seem easy. Coast is proactively working to build a financial platform for the future of transportation, beginning specifically with fleet and fuel payments. Coast's core benefit is that it offers a sophisticated solution that allows fleet managers to set policies and rules to proactively control spend. And as for the future vision of the company, Daniel sees Coast eventually offering other financial services to cater to the complex financial needs of their customers, including fleet management software, dispatch software, and more. Daniel and I go on to talk about his journey to becoming the CEO, where he sees the industry going in the next 2 to 3 years, and why he's not betting against the inevitable disappearance of Visa and MasterCard anytime soon. We've got a great episode ahead, so let's get started. Hi, Daniel. Thank you for being here, and welcome to the Leaders in Payments podcast.
Thanks for having me, Greg.
Absolutely. So let's dive right in. Tell our audience a little bit about yourself, maybe where you grew up, where you went to school, where you currently live, a few things like that, and then we'll dive into your professional journey in a minute.
I grew up in Boston area in a Soviet Jewish refugee family. I went to school a few places, actually. I dropped out of high school and a couple of colleges, but managed to graduate ultimately from Boston University, and eventually some years later got my law degree and my MBA from Yale. I've been in New York City for over 15 years now, and most of the time living in Brooklyn, which is where I live today.
Well, let's talk about the company. Tell us what Coast does.
So Coast is working to build the financial platform for the future of transportation, beginning with fleet and fuel payments. So if you're a company in the US that owns or operates a fleet of vehicles, and you've got a commercial payments need, that's kind of like the need that's solved in other businesses by your Amex corporate card, or if you want the venture capital backed examples, by Ramp or Brex or Divvy. You need to be able to give your employees something they can use to pay for job-related expenses. But when those expenses have to do with the vehicle, which could be maintenance or gas, which is the biggest use case, and the employees are your drivers, you have a bunch of specialized needs to prevent unauthorized charges by those driver employees. You've got different employees switching different vehicles or sharing cars. You need line item level detail. You want to make sure that they're buying the right grade of gas. They're not going into the convenience store or the gas station to buy potato chips and cigarettes, gassing up their personal car. This is a massive space that's dominated by a handful of players in the US that are huge and hugely profitable, and at least partly built on decades-old technology. And these 500,000 fleet businesses in the US that have at least half a dozen vehicles have no choice but to use one or the other. But these fleets are frustrated by the basics, like understanding their spend reports, alerting, security, card management, basic customer service. There's been some developments in recent years that created an opportunity now to do something that's truly transformational in the industry, and that's what we've created. We built a modern fleet card entirely from the ground up, reimagined for how it should be if it were born online and spoke a modern, interactive, digital language. It's easy to use. It has modern experiences delivered over the web and SMS, and it runs on Visa, so it can work at any fuel merchant that accepts credit cards, as well as for non-fuel categories. The core of the product is a sophisticated expense management solution that allows fleet managers to set policies and rules that make a difference for their fleet so they can control spending through the lens of their vehicles and through their employees. And we've been live since the beginning of the year with our initial product, and we're just getting started. We're iterating and adding new features every week.
And do you consider yourself more of a software company that has added payments, or a payments company that also provides software?
That's a really great question. I mean, it depends on the angle from which you look at it. I think either way, we're very clearly an example of the both verticalization of financial services in software and payments, and also just the joining software and payments. So we have this very vertical specific expense management solution that handles the specialized needs of companies that operate in fleets verticals. And that software is the reason that people really buy our product and not say, use their Capital One credit card for the same purpose. But payments is a very naturally embedded extension to that software. In our case, I would say we probably lean into the payments side of things first and sort of build out that suite of software behind it more than some other businesses. Like you might think of if you're Squire and you provide services for barbers to manage their businesses, and then you add on payments processing as a natural piece of that, that would be more of leaning in with software first. But I think it's the combination of the vertical specific software and the payments that's really the theme that Coast is a very good example of.
I'm very familiar with that space and sort of the PayFac side of it, just my background. But, I see the evolution of it being offering your customers eventually other banking services. I mean, do you see that as part of your vision in the future?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So our customers who operate vehicle fleets have complex financial lives. They care about operating capital. Receivables factoring is a big thing. There's other financial services needs. You can think about driver payroll. There could be a B2B2C story where you're offering consumer banking services, earned wage access for these millions of commercial drivers, that probably some of these neobanks would have a hard time reaching directly, but they're already holding a Coast card from their employer. There's other categories of commercial spend, roadside lodging, QSR, business banking, insurance, maybe even vehicle leasing and financing. The question is, could this very specialized, vertical specific, tailor-made product of the fleet payment solution and the software around it end up being the wedge that gives us permission to build that more holistic financial services platform for the industry? That's super exciting as well. It's really the fact that we're delivering a product just designed specifically for these needs that allow us to layer in all of those other adjacent financial services products and really be that full platform.
And is your sort of pricing model, is it based more on SaaS fees, transaction fees, a combination of the two?
It's both. So we make money in two ways. First, we charge the fleets a flat subscription fee to use the software. And second, we earn money from the interchange, which is to say that whenever a Coast Fleets customer driver dips a Coast card at a gas pump, that fuel retailer is paying Coast a percentage of the transaction through the Visa network.
Okay. And how big is the company right now?
We're 30-something people here in New York City.
Okay. And you have raised capital.
That's right. So we're a venture capital-backed business. We've raised about $43 million in equity capital to date. The seed round was led by Better Tomorrow Ventures, which is a fintech-focused seed fund, and the recent Series A was led by Excel and Insight. And I've also been fortunate to have participation from a lot of the same funds who backed me in the last business. So like folks at Bessemer and Box Group and Greycroft, as well as a great group of new investors and angels. It's a really great group around the table.
How do you go to market? How do you get your customers? Do you have a direct sales team, partner channels? How do you acquire new business?
Most of our distribution is direct. We acquire customers, for instance, through paid digital channels on the marketing side, and we have an inbound and outbound sales force here in the New York office. What's been really exciting in the short time that we've been live is that we find ourselves closing deals every week with customers that have 10, 20, 50, $100 million in revenue, sometimes in the billions, and almost always on sales cycles that are measured in a handful of days. Because we don't need to educate anybody about the product category. Typically, they're already using fleet cards from the incumbents already, and we're there when they're looking for something that's new and better. But our median customer is, I would say, more like a $4 million revenue business with, say, 12 to 15 vehicles in their fleet. And you asked about partnerships. I think looking ahead, I do think over time that partnership distribution becomes a very natural additional part of our business. There are plenty of technology companies that sell to our customer with whom we might one day be able to work to create a seamlessly integrated payments offering into their product. So, a few hypothetical examples could be fleet management software like Fleetio, dispatch software like ServiceTitan, telematics vendors like Samsara. These companies pretty much across the board recognize the opportunity for stickiness and revenue from this kind of a payment solution for their customers, but they're not financial services businesses. And partnering with a company like Coast to handle the complexity on the financial services side could be very natural. Even retailers are relevant. If you go today to the fleet's website of Discount Tire, which is the US's biggest independent tire retailer, you'll see them promoting Coast purely because it's helpful for Discount Tire to have their fleet customers carrying a modern fleet payment solution that Discount Tire can accept in their stores. So I expect that there's going to be a lot of opportunity in that area of partnership distribution of various kinds over time.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Are there niches within the fleet area? For example, is there a difference in how you work with companies that are maybe HVAC versus plumbers versus city-owned fleet vehicle? I mean, are there any differences or are they basically the same?
That is a really great question. I'll start by saying that we're focused on building financial services for companies that operate fleets businesses. It's important to understand just how many different kinds of verticals that category captures. Typically, a lot of the time, people hear fleet and they think truck, like a 18-wheeler semi hauling stuff interstate. And we definitely serve those customers, but it's a pretty small minority of our business, and the bulk of which is light and medium duty commercial vehicle fleets, the plumbers basically. So home services, pest control, alarm companies, HVAC, like you said, landscaping, limos, construction, local delivery, school buses, florists. It's a massive world. There's something like 3 million combination tractor trailers in the US, but there are 40 million commercial vehicles overall, with the rest being box trucks, heavy pickups, Mercedes Sprinter vans, and the like. So it's a pretty huge and a very varied part of the economy that we serve. I would say that the biggest sort of difference is between that heavy duty trucking on the one side versus the local commercial light and medium duty fleets on the other. Whereas with heavy trucking, it really is more about providing credit float and great rebates on gas that get some of these small independent owner operator truckers to purchase fleet payment solutions. On the local commercial fleet side, where gas isn't nearly as big of a line item in their operating budgets as it is in over-the-road trucking, it's really about the software. It's about control and security and visibility and reporting. That matters much more, so they can focus on spending their time growing their businesses more efficiently instead of doing spot checks of odometer readings in the parking lot and sort of line item tracking on receipts and the like. Those are really our more natural customers. And within those local commercial fleets, it is pretty similar in terms of the needs between sort of what your HVAC business owner and their drivers are going to need versus what a municipal fleet like school buses is going to need. They're filling up at a lot of the same stations. They're using the same places to buy gas, and they have similar control and visibility and reporting needs. So we're able to serve a pretty wide cross-section of these different verticals.
And you've mentioned there's a couple of existing solutions out there, obviously. So what would you say differentiates you guys from your competitors out there?
Yeah, as a backdrop, I'll say when we looked at the last decade in fintech, we observed so much product innovation and the development of low or no cost financial services for consumers and for some kinds of businesses like tech startups. But this fleet segment, which, as I've said, is so vast and vital to our economy, remains, in my opinion, underserved and deserves better. And with that in mind, I'd say we have 4 key differentiators from incumbent products. So first, it's universal acceptance, as I've said, wherever a merchant takes Visa. Our customers complain that existing solutions can be painful for both the employee and the fleet manager. Many existing fleet cards operate on proprietary closed-loop networks that were built by the incumbents, so drivers can waste valuable time that they could otherwise spend getting to the next job looking for a gas station that accepts their business's fuel card and also entering all sorts of identification information at the fuel pump that's required to authorize the transaction up front. Second, we have a rich, easy-to-use, and tightly integrated expense management platform. So fleets today struggle to understand and manage their spend and are unable to get clear and actionable insights about their businesses because they don't have simple and intuitive connection of payments into their accounting platforms, expense reporting, vehicle telematics, and fleet management software. And the manager software itself is also difficult to navigate. So fleets need payments products that are intuitive and easy to use and need their employee and vehicle payments seamlessly integrated into the rest of their operations. Third, fair and transparent pricing. So incumbent product offerings sometimes are riddled with expensive hidden fees and hard to understand terms. That again, look nothing like the products of modern financial technology businesses that have pioneered fairness and transparency for consumers and for venture capital-backed startups. So hidden fees that can add up to many thousands of dollars for small businesses have kind of been par for the course in fleet payments. And that's compounded by the fact that incumbents have really not delivered too much in terms of innovation in their products for some time. So fleets need fair and transparent financial products, which is what we've been focused on from day one. And then fourth and finally, just world-class customer service. Our fleets can reach us on our customer service lines where we're committed to solving any issues they have, which is really important for business owners and fleet managers that are looking to grow their businesses. And we've had amazing feedback on that as well.
Well, this might be a dumb question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Is there a difference between a fuel card and a fleet card?
I would say that the terms are used pretty interchangeably. We kind of, in our business, really are focused on the fleet side of things because the product does so much more than just enable the purchasing of fuel. A lot of the time when fleets purchase products from the incumbents, restricting payments to just fuel is kind of the table stakes for them, and simply having a product that's locked down to only allow certain kinds of fuel purchases with certain kinds of control restrictions is why they're looking for a product like this in the first place. But the kinds of payments that mobile workforces need to mediate on behalf of their businesses go well beyond fuel. So our product, while it allows for policies that can strictly control purchasing to restricted to fuel or other kinds of controls, it also can be used at the fleet manager's discretion to enable all sorts of other kinds of purchasing that goes well beyond that in terms of parking tickets, tolls, car washes, insurance, and more expensive purchases like maintenance and parts, really trying to solve the expense management needs across a number of different categories for fleets and not just focusing on one of the largest expenses, which is fuel.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, where do you see this payments industry? You can kind of answer this in the lens of just payments or, your business specifically in the fleet payments, but where do you see it headed in the next, say, 2 to 3 years?
Yeah, I'll say a couple of things, like one about Coast particularly, and also speak about payments generally. So on Coast, we're building the financial platform for the future of transportation, like I've said, but regardless of whatever form the energy that powers that transportation might take. And so today that means paying for diesel gas to fill an internal combustion engine or to power an internal combustion engine. Tomorrow that could be charging an EV battery. That shift is coming. It's going to come over a timeline of years for it to be sort of really broadly commercially feasible and for the changeover of fleets to happen. And we're going to figure out our place in that changing world. We already support EV charging, but we think we're going to be able to provide much richer data and visibility and insights over time. And on payments generally, I think, I'd like to return to this point about verticalization and specialization. This question about software and payments combined. Everyone points to Shopify's partnership with Stripe Connect. You mentioned PayFax, to make Shopify payments as the archetypical example of this every company will be a fintech company idea. And by charging for payments, a major part of the revenue nominally comes from financial services. But it's important to remember that these are not fundamentally financial services businesses. Like they don't want to figure out credit and risk and capital markets and legal compliance, account opening fraud, transaction monitoring, et cetera. Software companies want to allocate this risk and operational burden and complexity to specialized financial services providers while they bring the customer at a low acquisition cost by integrating financial services to a place where their existing customer really needs it. And the software company gets customer stickiness and increased revenue from the combined offering. So, the buy now, pay later space is a great example of this. Consumer purchase finance is a really old model because embedding financial services makes sense. Like the customer isn't looking for a loan, they're looking to buy a couch and they're already there in the store to do that. So if you can offer them that payments and credit solution right then and there so they can afford to buy the couch, the value creation for the merchant and the consumer is a really big win. So the same principle can take hold in so many other software businesses now besides commerce. That's particularly true in vertical SaaS. If you're Cloud Trucks and you offer a business in a box for truckers, you should also offer factoring and instant payments that your customers need, as well as business banking. If you're, like I said, Squire, and you help barbers manage their bookings, you should help them accept payments and do barber payroll. And if you're Coast, a tailor-made expense management solution for companies that operate vehicle fleets, you're absolutely going to issue a charge card. So the offering of financial services is growing more and more ubiquitous across a number of different company categories. And you have to distinguish between being a fintech company in the sense of providing an important channel for distributing financial services versus being a financial services company in your own right. And so I see that kind of partnership and symbiosis really taking hold in a lot of areas over the coming years.
Do you think that things like crypto and blockchain have a role in fleet in the future?
I would say that about crypto, I don't pretend to know anything about anything. I will say, however, the one thing I'm willing to say is I'm not betting against the disappearance of Visa and MasterCard anytime soon.
Yeah. I would agree with you on that one. All right. Well, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about you. So maybe walk us through your journey of how you got to become the founder and CEO of Coast.
Sure. So as a software engineer, left school at 16, got a job as a robotics software engineer at EMC Corporation, which is a big company in Massachusetts where I worked for some years. After I finished college, I went to work for a boutique technology consultancy that specializes in financial services. My job was to lead teams to design and build systems for investment banks, asset managers, hedge funds, like a lot of Wall Street stuff. It was a great career. I worked with super smart people, built what I still think was really cutting edge technology for a bunch of marquee clients, Blackstone, Guggenheim, Fidelity, Reuters, Microsoft, handful of others. And the money was good, but I was interested in politics and policy and other stuff. And, I wasn't going to get there for my tech career. And, like I mentioned, I had this really spotty academic background. So I figured if I go to Yale Law School, people will think I'm smart. And I went to Yale Law School and it totally worked. And now people think I'm smart. And, while I was there, I tried some of the stuff that was nominally interesting to me. My first summer, I worked in counterterrorism policy in the government and realized pretty quickly I didn't want to be a civil service bureaucrat after all. It was like, okay, I don't want to be a lawyer. I don't want to be a banker. I don't want to be a consultant. I don't only want to write code, even though I love writing code. I guess I have to get a job at a hedge fund. So for the second summer and third and final year of that JD MBA program, I ended up working at a medium-sized multi-strategy hedge fund and just realized I couldn't make it my life's work. And it was around that time that interesting people with interesting ideas started approaching me to co-found fintech companies. And my co-founder, my first company, who became CEO there, was one of them. And so I started a first company, which is called Bread, in my last semester of grad school and ran it for about 5.5, 6 years after that. I'll say as an aside, it's a bit of an idiosyncratic background. I've done a little bit of a bunch of stuff and in some cases more of a few things. It ended up being really well suited to running a fintech business. So both Bread and Coast are so very much technology companies at their core. Everybody in financial services likes to say that, but I think in payments it's really true. And I am, if you'll pardon me for saying so, pretty good. Software engineer and product person. Finance is a language I speak pretty well, not so much from the MBA, just more from the years in a peripheral technology role at the banks. It's a set of concerns I understand. And the legal and regulatory training comes to bear every single day. And what you can probably appreciate is a really complex and regulated industry. So I can sort of be the best Daniel I can be running a fintech company. That first company, Bread, is part of what's now the so-called BNPL business. So if you're familiar with companies like Affirm or Klarna, very much in that category, effectively allowing consumers shopping online to spread out payments over simple installments over time. My role there was CTO and COO, and the CEO and I ran the business in close partnership. I was really focused on the operations of the business, the marketing sales pipeline, the repeatable, scalable recruiting, a culture that would grow with the team, a lot of day-to-day stuff, but also doing what I think I really do best, which is designing the product and how it interfaces with all the financial services infrastructure that was external to the company. That was a venture-backed business. We raised a little more than $100 million, and we were probably close to about 200 people or so. And we ended up selling that business to Alliance Data Systems in 2020 for around $500 million. So it was a happy outcome after a number of years of hard work. When I left, I knew I was going to do something new in early stage fintech, but I didn't really have the thing that was exciting to me. So I kicked around for a while. I was an advisor to a handful of startups, was an entrepreneur in residence at a Silicon Valley venture capital firm. And it was pretty great after almost 6 years, laser focused on the problems of one business, to pick my head up and say, what's everybody else working on? What are the other problems and challenges that are out there? What's exciting? What's frankly not exciting to me in early stage fintech? And it was in the context of those conversations that really it was some VC who said to me, hey, Daniel, you should take a look at these fleet payments. And I said, what's that? And I looked at it and I haven't been able to think about anything else ever since. And so I ended up starting the business in late 2020 and kind of been off to the races ever since. I looked at a lot of stuff in 2020. Nothing got me anywhere nearly as excited as Coast. A lot of the stuff that got me excited about Coast kind of rhymed with the same stuff that got me excited about Bread when we were starting that more than 8 years ago now. You have this massive market that very few people in tech and venture capital are spending time thinking about, that's dominated by a handful of players with huge margins that don't always treat their customers super well, but are solving like a really big need and pain point for a huge sector of the economy with a business model that's proven to really work at a massive scale, but where the incumbents aren't necessarily at their core technology businesses that are focused in innovation. I look at that pattern and I feel I've got to be able to build something just absolutely huge here. I felt the same way about some of the scorecard providers in 2014 when we started Bread as I feel about the fleet payments incumbents today. And that's just what got me super excited.
Okay. Did you have something to do with the naming of Bread and Coast because they're both one syllable and 5 letters?
It's not. The answer to the question is Yes, I did. It's not a coincidence. I like names that aren't like pay this or fin that.
Right.
I want things that are simple, memorable. And by the way, I can't take particularly for Brett. I can't take full credit for that. That was definitely my co-founder and I worked on that quite some time. But Coast, I feel certainly some parentage for that name. I want people to sort of have a visual image when they think about our product and our business. There's lots of puns to it. You can think about the coast by the sea. You can think about a vehicle coasting down the road or some actual image that combines the two. I like them punchy, memorable, tough to get the trademark on, but it's worth it.
Yeah, no, I love both of the names, by the way. Well, what are some things you're passionate about? So maybe one work-related passion and one personal passion.
Like on the work-related passion, I think of myself really primarily as a product person. I just love building really great software products in complex spaces that make those complex spaces seem easy to the user. And that's why I love working in fintech, because fintech's just really messy and hard. You've got laws and regulations that just were not designed for the modern digital experiences that we're trying to create. You've got entrenched incumbents, you've got aging infrastructure. And so it's very hard to deliver these smooth product experiences to users. In order to make it happen, you really need to get a lot of things working together correctly. It's not just the product engineering side of things. You have to think about risk and capital markets and the sort of obviously the revenue functions of business development and marketing and sales and customer success. You have to think about operations, servicing, collections, a ton of legal and regulatory compliance stuff. All of that stuff needs to work together collaboratively, seamlessly to create an experience for the user that looks like there's nothing going on when really there's insane complexity under the hood. And that really creates stickiness and engagement. And that gets me so excited if we can get it right. And that also creates moats around the business. And for me personally, that just makes me feel like I have the leverage in weaving all those pieces together to make a really big impact. And that gets me sort of excited every day. On the personal side, I've become a boring person as a venture-backed startup founder, kind of like some of my friends with kids who only talk about the kids in the early years of their existence. Here I am having my second quote-unquote kid with a second venture-backed startup and kind of speak incessantly into no one's interest about it. So you'll be hard-pressed to find real personal passions for me these days.
Okay. So next question, and I started in this payment space way before fintech was ever a word and sort of fell into the industry. But now it's like you've said all along, as fintech is so popular, it's kind of a sexy industry. There's so much capital being invested in it. Kids are taking fintech courses now. So what advice would you give a recent college graduate who wants to get into fintech? What would you tell them they need to do to be successful?
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, when we started the last business, they definitely weren't teaching fintech classes in Harvard Business School, which still kind of blows my mind that it's happening today. I would say a couple of things. One, if you do get into payments and fintech, when you're building a product and ultimately when you're building an organization, my advice is to focus on what makes you, your company, really different and how you in particular are helping your customers, and not to get distracted by efforts to rebuild and improve parts of your stack that should really be commodity services. In a lot of ways, it's never been a better time to build fintech and payments products. I started a payments and credit company in the first half of the teens, and now I'm doing it again in the first half of the 20s. And it's a world of difference in terms of how much you can lean on great infrastructure products and other providers. In the first business, we built absolutely everything from the ground up because nothing was available in market that could drive the experience we wanted to deliver. So this is a few examples of credit and fraud decisioning, an AML and KYC compliance framework and enhanced diligence, direct and sometimes very cumbersome and difficult integrations with legacy downstream data providers, batching to money movement over ACH and other rails in all directions, payments reconciliation, settlement reporting, the list goes on and on. And it was really difficult. It took a lot of time to launch. And you always needed to devote a team and money and time and attention to fixing and maintaining it all. When none of that was what made us special at all. Like what made us special was creating beautiful and simple, engaging payments and credit experiences for merchants and buyers. So it's so much better to launch a fintech product now. There are solutions like those from Alloy for decisioning, Modern Treasury for payments and reconciliation. You can use Persona for ID verification, Inscribe and Ocros for document authentication, VGS and basis theory for security and data tokenization. There's tons of banking as a service solutions from Stripe and Lithic and Unit and others. And they all allow you to get to market much more rapidly and efficiently. In addition to the tools, the other service providers have really professionalized their offerings, including more BIN-sponsored banks, the law firms, the debt funds. They're the resources to run a playbook, and founders don't have to figure this stuff out from scratch and cobble it together themselves. So I would urge people to just take advantage of that. Leave all that stuff to them. Focus again on what's special about your product for your particular user. And second, I would say in another category of advice, I would say don't be afraid of, quote, niche markets. Like in payments, there are huge markets everywhere you turn. You could look at Coast and say payments for transportation, that seems like a niche market. Well, in the US, you have $120 billion being transacted on commercial fleet cards. Like that's one heck of a niche, right? That's more than 10% of US business to business card spend, right? And you see this dynamic and these kinds of staggering numbers in all sorts of corners of the payments world. So I just wouldn't worry too much about niches. The payments economy is huge everywhere you look.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's both very sound pieces of advice. Well, Daniel, we've covered a lot of ground about you and the company and sort of your background. Is there anything else you'd like to cover before we wrap up?
No, I think that's it. I think that this has been a really interesting conversation that's gone in a lot of interesting areas. So I really appreciate you guiding us here.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I appreciate you being on the show. I know your time is very valuable. So Daniel, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Greg.
And to all you listeners out there, I thank you for your time as well. And until the next story.
Thank you for joining us this week on the Leaders in Payments podcast. Make sure you visit our website at leadersinpayments.com, where you can subscribe to the show and where you'll find our show notes. If you enjoyed listening, please share on your social channels as well.